Okay, we're going to look into where did blue eyes originate from, and this is a study that's come out with a paper back in 2014, but it's been updated, and I'll give you a little bit of an update onto it. I'll tell you, studies carried out by scientists from the Institute of Forensic Genetics at the University of Copenhagen have concluded that all blue-eyed people share a common ancestor, someone who lived 6 to 10,000 years ago near the area by the Black Sea. And people have taken this, and I've seen a lot of articles about it. I did a debunk onto it, and I did another one too that shows you one of the genetic studies I could show you in here. But if I showed you all this, it'd end up being a three-parter. You know how I am. But the genetic study showed that debunk the idea that nobody had blue eyes before 6 to 10,000 years ago. That is not what is said in it in any way, shape, or form. People had blue eyes and so on, but the genetics of these blue-eyed people seem to converge back to a point of these Proto Indo Europeans that all had blue eyes, apparently in an extreme high amount, and their genetics runs down through the area, all the way through Europe, all the way down through into the Levant and into Egypt and so on. And before Egypt formed, before the Levant was called the Levant and so on, back here 10 to 6,000 years ago, and that the idea of a light-skinned person who only showed up at 6 to 10,000 years ago is actually fake. I'll try to put it down in the comments down there. It's light skin genes go back 600,000 BC is what they figured out of, genetics, looking back and tracing, and when that would actually have been there is like it had to have been way back then, like whenever we're just, sapiens coming good, sapiens, and that they would have had this lighter skin gene. And they also prophesy in that paper that before then it wasn't that they had a dark skin gene, it's just that it triggered to a lighter skin gene. And this would have been way back at the point of going into the last ice age kind of situation, so it seemed to trigger off of that in some way, shape, or form. That led him to believe that it might have been extreme changing of diets and all these things they came up with now, but it really doesn't follow that, and genetics doesn't show that it does so in such a way. But researchers analyzed and compared the unique genetic makeup of the chromosomes for the iris from 155 blue-eyed individuals from diverse regions such as Denmark, Turkey, and Jordan. And now I think they have over 1,600 in there, or the paper I saw said that they were comparing not the 155, but the 155 and 1,600 out of the whole area that they had figured out that they found when they ran it through their test. These people all have it too. So let's see what all they have in common, and they conjuncted that together. Anyhow, all of the subjects that participated in the study had the exact same genetic mutations in specific chromosomes of the eye, with very little variation on the genes, indicating that the mutation responsible for the blue eyes first arose and spread relatively recently. And in the third paper that I could show you now too, it's really some researcher, and he's just going through basics. And what he shows is that due to genetics and the way things trace down, you can find in Europe where everybody, do you know what 6 degrees of separation of Kevin Bacon is? Right? Do you know what that is? Where it's like somehow you can track it down with everything? Well, what they're saying is he gives an example of Constantine, and now because that's a little over 1,000 years ago, you can basically have about a 50-50 shot of being in Europe and having somebody that connects to Constantine. Well, why? Well, you can go back to like 12 generations before him and everybody that led through him, which he's just one of the cousins and kids of, that all would have the same situation. And everybody that came from that. And he shows how it's weird how, you say, okay, well, Constantine turns into 4, turns into 8 to 16 to 32 to a million, right? And so in that fact, the chances of somebody, by saying, well, my second cousin is the granddaughter of da-da-da, who was the third cousin of the Earl of Blah, who was the second grandson of Ba, who was the son-in-law of da of Constantine. You know, if you follow me, I'm sorry for going down such a stupid little line there, but that idea. And so he also, in his little thing, debunks the idea of this. Well, everybody came from this one blue-eyed guy, and it's like, no, it's not that. It's that, yes, but he's not the only one. It's not like this one guy, like you have this Adam and Eve concept. It isn't that. It's that this guy that's a representative that they have found has this, and all these people have that. Was there anybody before? Yes. Oh, yes. It wasn't like he was the first person to ever have blue eyes ever in the world. Okay? So, when we look at this, you can see people all over. And you can see that somewhat Aryan influences here all the way through Iran, all the way through even northern India and so on, still developed into there. Pakistan and the areas with blonde hair and things too. And and this is just a small representative. You can find redheads there and still to this day, but there's smaller amounts of it. But one interesting fact is Muhammad had red hair. They celebrate it actually. So it kind of comes from a lot of things. Scientists conclude that this blue-eyed family spread out from an area north of the Black Sea following the last ice age. So way back at 10,000 BC, these people were among the Proto Indo European Aryans, who subsequently spread agriculture into Western Europe and later red horses into Iran and India, and also spread them into, well, explains Professor Hans Eiberg of the Department of Cellular and Molecular Medicine at the University of Copenhagen. Yeah. This also contains the Hyksos, which came later, but this also the same kind of concept of these people who come down with chariots. A lot of people aren't aware, but all they had was donkeys back then and stuff. Even Sumeria, who's full of blue-eyed people and everything, ran off donkeys and stuff. It's what they pretty much had, and there's only one group that got these horses going on, and it was kind of kept for them for a long time. And even though they made visits and did all these things, it didn't really happen until much later. They came on down. So blue eyes are a recessive trait, though, and the gene must be inherited from both parents. Green eyes, and your parents don't have to have both blue eyes. It's just they have to have that. So you can ask them if their parents or grandparents had blue eyes, and if they did, they pretty much got it, but they may not have it. They may have green or brown, but they can actually kick a blue-eyed kid. Regardless of that, though, it's much stronger, and it keeps the line if you have blue on blue, just like if you're doing dogs or anything like that. Anyhow, green eyes, though, involve a related but different gene that is recessive to brown but dominant to blue. So if you have a green eye trait, like you see in Ireland a lot and things, that's going to drown out the blue a little bit, right? But then again, it kicks to brown. So you have that effect too, and this is how you can get a lot of people that are going to have green and blue eyes and stuff. Well, was there ever a people that was all just blue-eyed and blonde hair and everything? No, I don't think so. I think there was a people that had a whole bunch of dark brown and light brown hair and auburn hair and a lot of red hair and light red and strawberry blonde hair, and a whole lot of them had green and blue eyes, and they were kicking for the blue-eyed trait more. Not that I don't really think they would shun green eyes and be like, oh, get the hell out of here, or anything stupid, but it's definitely kicked towards then. And of course you do that with nobility through a period of time, and the people that come out of that, and then they're going to breed with people, and there's a preference going on, and it's just going to dominate like hell, even though it's somewhat of a recessive gene. So how does that get so strong? Well, you can see here they show you how they spread out all this around, and we see the Tocharians up here that we talked about, the Germanics and the Celts, and we talked about Isaac and Kurgan burials over here, and how the Saxons come out of that, and Isaac's sons, and then you have Saxons over here and the Celts and so on. You can see it's just a big mix. But the Indo-Aryans that are here and the true Aryans that run back around and through and bite their own tail, the Sumerians, and yeah, they show them coming into Egypt here too, pre-dynastic Egyptians. And you can see that definitely inside of like Ginger and a lot of the earliest ones. We're about to look at a couple of them. So Following the ending of the last ice age, many Europeans inherited this rare gene associated with blue-eyed people that differentiated them from the rest of the human races. Indeed, it appears that the elite and nobility that organized the earliest known agricultural civilizations all shared this trait, seemingly coming from the same bloodlines in ancient times. And you can see here in Egypt, well, this is Hor-Aha right here himself, and he has blue eyes. In Sumeria, it's, most of the statues are blue-eyed. In Peru, they had blue-eyed statues. Even in India, and Gautama Buddha himself is he shows blue eyes. They talk about it. In fact, one of the requirements for somebody to have been so sacred was to have blue eyes. And you find that strange in a list, a people that aren't necessarily known for that, but let's continue. When we look to ancient Egypt, arguably one of the world's oldest known civilization, we find many blonde and fair-haired mummies. And I've shown you that in a couple other vids where they have blonde, red-haired mummies, and there'll be some pictures down here. Since World War II, Western academia, backed and lobbied by political motivated forces at the United Nations and their whole let's muddy up the world and just lie, has pushed for a Marxist-inspired multicultural view of history, which has ignored archaeological evidence in favor of political correctness, or no, don't offend them, even though it's a lie. However well-intentioned, this false perspective has cast much confusion over human origins and who we are and how we came to be, and I've tried to shed some light back onto that, and it definitely hooks up to these primordial Caucasians that seem to have heralded mankind. And so, of course, this is looked at as being bad because of the A word that I've said a couple of times here now. But, of course, truth is truth, reality is reality, fact's a fact, Jack. So, here we see Yuya and Thuya, and a lot of people have said this is Joseph and so on, but Hatshepsut, Amenhotep, Tutmosis, Ramses himself, even the pre-dynastic mummy known as Ginger, with his pale skin but blonde curly hair. On the exhibit they used to, I don't know if they still do, had a little plaque, and one of the little corner pictures there was a picture of a Greek statue, and they say he has curly blonde hair, which looks a lot like the ones in Greek statues. It's like an Adonis type statue, I believe. But if the blonde hair of the Egyptian mummies you see pictured above was a result of the mummification process, then why are the statues of the royal Egyptian pharaohs and nobility pictured below with blue eyes? Well, this is an old thing they talked about there. They've already run everybody's hair samples through the natron process and everything. And of course, you can just look at somebody's hair under a microscope and you can tell that that's, Caucasian hair or that's not, and what the reality of it is. And it's simple. They have variations of this, and they've also been able to look inside the follicles right at the hair stem and be able to tell if they had red hair in time, just like Ramses. Ramses really an old man that pretty much had gray hair, but they can pull out your follicle and look inside there, and well, he doesn't have all these, he just has the red thing going on. This is a pale leucoderm right here, and they do the same forensics they would do to find some dead body just sitting out here or so on, or find some dead body that's been there for 20 years, but they can pull a couple of hairs out and go, okay, he was a redhead. Well, here's this red-headed man. Is he 55? What does his dental pattern look like? And they can track him down. Of course, they don't have dental patterns of these guys, but then again, the craniometry and dental patterns show them to be Caucasians of the area right around there, and these North Africans and Badarians, and how it all blends back into it, too. In fact, I think they say that he looks more like a Berber in his head style than some of the other ones that they have found in contrast. And you'll get some of these pictures here too, and you'll see all of these blue-eyed guys going on. And yeah, in the scribe here, now some of these blue eyes, which are weird, and I'm going to do a video on it separate just because how neat it is. They use these crystal eyes you can see across the stream here, and no, they're not zoomed in. I've done it in a few of my other videos. But if you turn as you walk around, they're kind of blue-gray, and then they get real blue, and then they get blue-gray and real blue. And what's weird is they kind of look like real eyes and have that gleam and shine in them, so it almost looks like they're really looking at you. It's something they only did for a while in there, and it shows some extreme craftsmanship, and it's one of the reasons that they say that they used to have incredible craftsmanship, and it kind of petered out and got worse and worse and worse. And of course, early on they built the pyramids, and then never anything of that caliber and all these things. So it's kind of like they went over a hill and just didn't really You know, kind of like a roller coaster has that one big hill, and then after that, never anything quite like that. Yeah, and I guess that'd be a good connotation for it, though. But yeah, and even Nefertiti here, she's missing one of her eyes, but the other one is definitely blue. And the different scribes and things that are shown here. And here's Nofret, and it kind of looks gray in that statue there. In fact, looking here at this scribe here, Mitri, he's got a blue eye and kind of a gray eye, and I guarantee if you went a little to the right, it'd be blue and go back and forth. But her eyes have that effect a little bit too. But you can, of course, see how pale she is. It's and her husband both have these crystal blue eyes. It's amazing. Nofret, Nofret. Just, you know, you can Google that, or dynastic blue-eyed Egyptians, and it'll show you. And she's early dynastic. I think she's 5th dynasty. So another one of the oldest documented civilizations that is credited with having the very first writing, schools, courts, and many other firsts was the ancient Sumerians of Mesopotamia. Of course, we found a few other writing styles that are from them, and the Proto-Linear A, and the writing that's found over into Europe slightly that can actually predate this somewhat too. But of course, clay tablets, and if they didn't fire them, all those are gone. The ancient Sumerians thought that blue eyes were a sign of the gods, though. Sumerian nobility were blue-eyed and fair-haired, and most of their busts show this. These blue-eyed statues pictured below are of Sumerians from the early and mid-3rd millennium BC. They are the Sumerians. Certainly belong to the same racial division of mankind as the nations of Europe. They are the scions of the Caucasian stock. And this was written by Arthur Keith, who was quoted in excavations in 1927 when they were excavating the city and finding all the artifacts. And they were like, oh, here you go. Of course, that was definitely covered up, and anything about this was really looked as being, oh, man, that kind of ruins the Bible thing, don't it? Oh, it's got a story about a boat, and they let loose a dove and everything. Shh, you know, it just became a hiss. Gautama Buddha's physical body is traditionally regarded as having the 32 characteristics of a great man. These 32 characteristics are described throughout the Pali Canon and are also regarded as being present in Chakravartin kings as well. Number 29 on this ancient list is eyes, deep blue. And you see here where he has the deep blue eyes, and of course here's a shell which has the sacred little swirl into it that's pretty much representative of a pine cone, if you will. But all these pictures, and this is just a small scratch of how many pictures of Buddha that actually show these blue eyes. And I showed you one recently of a tomb painting, and it's the one that they showed an ancient sun temple they had found in the ground way up near China. And in that picture frame there, it shows you one of the ancient burials. It's not quite up there, but in that burial picture, it shows two priests talking to each other, one very pale and red-headed, a little bit bug-toothed, and he's showing the sacred symbol that you see all the way through Christianity and everything. It's kind of, you know, blow your mind. It's like, check this out. But some people just don't want to check that out. 2,000 years ago, a mysterious and little-known civilization, the Blue-Eyed Elite, ruled the northern coast of Peru also. Its people were called the Moshe. They built huge pyramids and still dominate the surrounding countryside, some well over 100 feet tall. Archaeologists working at Peru's Huaca Pilquina ruins recently pulled a blue-eyed mummy from an ancient tomb thought to be from an ancient Wari culture that also flourished before the Incas, piercing blue eyes, undimmed by the passing of 1,300 years. This is the Lady of the Mask, a mummy with the striking blue eyes whose discovery could reveal the secrets of a lost culture at the Huaca Pilquina Pyramid located in Lima, Peru. It is the first time a tomb from the region's Wari culture has been discovered intact, and it gives historians a chance to learn about the ancient pre-Inca civilizations. You can see the stark blue eyes, and I've showed this in a couple of videos. I even showed some live footage of it being pulled out, but they flagged it, so I cut it and put a small piece in there, and now after 2 years they flagged that too. And regardless, so let's just continue here. But you can see this ancient Wari culture, known as the Cloud People, that were there also. And of course, whenever they go to find all these mummies up there, a lot of them have red heads and auburns and even blonde hairs. And whenever Pizarro showed up, they thought that he was the children, that he was actually Quetzalcoatl himself coming back, or Viracocha coming back, and it's because he was blue-eyed, blonde-haired, and had a big beard, and that's what their whole thing was about. And so they just knew it was him. And what's strange is the locals don't have that, but he saw that they were fair-skinned versus the people out working, and noted it quite well. So this is almost a farming thing, or two totally different classes of people. But then he saw a blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl with a baby, and he asked them about her, and they said, well, she's one of the last of the children of the gods. It's all written down. And then he found these skulls with all this blonde hair he talked about, the color of wheat, and they even have them still in the Lima, Peru Museum. Here's a Moche ruler whose golden blue-eyed mask, now called the Joy of Saipan, was found in his grave. It was untouched. He was called Viracocha by the Indians, Kukulkan by the Mayas, Quetzalcoatl by the Aztecs, and Cucumats in Central America, Votan in Palenque, and Zamna in Ismal. He is, in some cases, his men were described as being tall, bearded, with white skin and beautiful emerald blue eyes. Fray Juan Torquemada, of the Franciscan missioner, who collected traditions about Quetzalcoatl from the natives of Old Mexico, says Quetzalcoatl had blonde hair, wore a black robe sewn with little crosses of red color, image below published by the Secretary of Education in Mexico. And this is Canalejo de Luna. And so, isn't that a bunny? Canalejo de Luna is the moon. Oh, wait, this is a story of the bunny and the moon. Oh, here it is. There's a bunny right there. Okay, so it's a story of the rabbit and the moon and stuff, and it's got a whole symbology with it. You see the little snake and its coil running around too. You see this, and how he's actually being carried around into a snake raft thing. Almost has that American Indian, but look at this, with a full beard on him and everything. And this is the picture of what they say he looks like. This thing right here, right? And this is Department of Education. Scientists stress that the genetic variation, as the press release puts it, neither a positive nor a negative mutation. That's a bit disingenuous, as the mutation also produces greater instances of blonde hair, sexually selected for even today. And blondes have more fun, and ladies do their hair, and a lot of times it'll start to turn brassy, and they blonde it back out. Fair skin, and it's been a Caucasian edict since forever. You see it in Egyptian art where the women are very pale, and the men are shown to be in action, so they're drawn, more tanned. And this is the idea, and of course, this farmers and stuff like that, where if they do everything right, she doesn't really have to work, and he works. He's going to be more tan, and red ochre burials that go with this, and it goes all the way back into Cro-Magnon town. But anyhow, they tell you that which confers a survival advantage by stimulating greater production of vitamin D in sun-starved northern European countries near the Arctic Circle, where blue eyes are still most prevalent. And yeah, it became a decent advantage whenever somebody has paler skin, but yet that melanin that can tan up and things, if you get closer to the border and you're working all the time, you'll get more tan. If you're not, you'll get less, and you'll still absorb more. And the paler you get, the more sunlight you'll get. If you start getting a lot of sun, you'll start to get more tan, and of course inside of a moon or two it'll pale back out, and so it kind of has an equilibrium working on to it. And I think that equilibrium was probably satiated whenever people used to migrate somewhat with herds up and down and north and south and north and south with all the seasons. But that's just a thought that I have. 95% of Europeans in Scandinavian countries have blue eyes. They're also found to have a greater range of hair and skin color comparatively. Europe has a wider variety of hair color and skin pigment that is found in any other continent in the world. These mutations are relatively recent, as Europe was colonized only a few thousand years ago, say mainstream scientists. Through inbreeding to the people, the brunette with blue eyes, Neanderthal type, was evidenced about 35 to 25,000 years ago by invading Cro-Magnon types from the Atlantic. Tall, Rh-negative blood types, Solutrean toolkits, and so on had come with those. Now they have found, though, that Neanderthals actually do contain a red-haired gene, definitely, a green or blue-eyed form, too, in them also. So having it evident in both of them, and of course, Neanderthal shows up to be some maximum about 6%, but usually 2 to 4% inside of a person, so it's almost nothing. But what does it pop up like popcorn occasionally? Well, at one point they thought maybe that's where all redheads came from whenever they found that they had red heads, but now they've looked at the genetic sequences of Cro-Magnon, which I'll read to you, and it shows you that no, they already had that a long time ago, and this blows out the idea of the 10,000. The question really is, where do we go from having nobody on Earth known with blue eyes 10,000 years ago to having 20 to 40% of Europeans having blue eyes now? Well, scientists claim Cro-Magnon DNA is fully modern, unchanged for 28,000 years. A Cro-Magnon DNA sequence 28,000 years old was obtained from fossil bones discovered in the Paglaki cave in Italy. The results show that the DNA is identical to the DNA sequences of certain modern Europeans now. The DNA sequence has remained static and unchanged over 28,000 years. This means that Cro-Magnon was a fully modern individual with perhaps had a larger brain capacity at that time, and blue-eyed and light skin traits and the whole 9 yards at that point, of course, too. And here's an ancient burial that shows you it's kind of famous, and all the shells that are done with it, and each one's individually worked and done into a dressing. Now, John Hawks of the University of Wisconsin-Madison said, "This gene does something good for people. It makes them have more kids." In contrast, most mammals on Earth share the normal form of the gene. The 6-letter sequence is exactly the same among mice, horses, cows, rats, dogs, monkeys, chimpanzees, and humans with brown eyes. No word on what gives Siberian Huskies and Siamese cats blue eyes at this point, and you can even find it in some animals, even in horses and things like that. So it's kind of neat. And here's a few people that are talking about it, and Asian ancestors from FM170, Sethites, red-haired things, and different ones that are showing up around. And of course, now we found out that there is ancient Caucasians that led over and into Siberia and into the Americas that predate all of the Asiatic, what became the Amerindians. Before them now, they found burials and things over there. And at first they saw close. I've done a video on that, and it said, hey, here's a crisscross going on that we never thought existed. And then now they found them actually into Alaska. And so the idea of, well, did they mix and go in? What happened? Because it seems a one-way journey, and they find them all the way down in. And maybe this explains all these blonde-haired mummies and stuff. The Mandan Sioux were known to have had blonde hair and so on, and a few others show up, and of course they all have tales of the red-haired giants and all these things that were going on before they showed up that disappeared. So where does that come from, and where does these stories of Quetzalcoatl and these gods with this blue-eyed trade and this strange thing that they record being people that are definitely Caucasoid? Anyhow, guys, like, share, and subscribe, and enjoy. And we'll get on to the next video here. Take care. Peace.